vision, leadership, workplace-related topics. The Voices of Victory podcast show. Subscribe today. Let's go.
Vision, leadership, self-esteem, workplace-related topics.
Subscribe.
The Voices of Victory podcast show.
Voices of Victory.
Vision,
Voices of Victory.
leadership,
Voices of Victory.
workplace-related topics.
The Voices of Victory.
Voices of Victory. Voices of Victory. Voices of Victory.
It's time for the show. You are now listening to the Voices of Victory podcast show.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mario Di Leone.
Hello and welcome to the Voices of Victory podcast. I am your host, Mario Di Leone. We talk about all things psychology, all things leadership, all things vision-based, as well as workplace. And here we are. We're talking about a very special topic today. The circles the avoidant takes you in. If you don't know what an avoidant is, it stems from the word avoid, where someone avoids meaningful connections. There's more to that. Let's unpack that right here, right now, right on this show, and let's break it down. The biggest question I have for you is, why does it seem like avoidants always circle back to their anxious exes? And what can you do if you find yourself caught in that very circle? If you're someone who tends to be highly attuned to the emotional distance in your relationships, feeling every subtle shift, every pause in communication, well, there's a good chance you lean towards an anxious attachment style. And that awareness can feel like a superpower, but it often comes hand in hand with deep uncertainty. They leave you uncertain, and that is the feeling that provokes and creates the anxiousness. That's why it's a cycle. So you might constantly wrestle with fears that the relationship is slipping through your fingers again and again and again. And maybe this isn't new for you. Maybe it is. I don't know. Either way, here's what I want you to know. If someone who once pulled away is now drifting back into your life, it's not random. And how you respond can change everything. This pattern between the avoidant and the anxious isn't about who's right or wrong. It's about two nervous systems responding to fear and connection in dramatically different ways. The avoidant, at their core, they want connection, but vulnerability, really difficult for them. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but extremely difficult. And that's what terrifies them, vulnerability. They're not pushing you away because they don't care. They have difficulty with being vulnerable. They're trying to protect themselves from what they perceive as danger, and that is called emotional exposure. They feel emotionally exposed. It leads them down the vulnerability pathway. And here's where the deeper story begins. Many avoidants learned early on that being emotionally open came with a price. And this could have been a child growing up or was conditioned while they were growing up, that if they spoke out, if they spoke their truth, and they were vulnerable, that there was some kind of punishment just right around the corner. And maybe their needs were completely dismissed and they were shut down, mocked, or maybe it was even used against them. So they built an internal equation that space equals safety and intimacy equals risk. And as a result, they learn to maintain emotional distance to survive. So here's how the loop goes. They feel lonely, they miss connection, and they reach out. Maybe there's a little baited hook called flirting. With charm and warmth, you reconnect. Things feel hopeful. They feel good until it gets too close, and suddenly they pull back. Ghosting, shutting down, maybe nitpicking, or maybe even responding 5 days later. Delayed responses, pretending that the connection was never real. And just as quickly, the cycle resets. They feel empty again. And when you leave them, it can very well be that they fall into self-blame, self-doubt, and maybe even they are feeling overwhelmed and don't know how to handle their feelings. And they reach out again. This isn't manipulation. It's protection. It's a mechanism. Their nervous system is fighting them, screaming at them to avoid something it creates. Now, here's the big kicker. If you're anxiously attached, this kind of behavior doesn't just confuse you, it activates you. It can stir up the storm of need, which comes from your childhood, the external chase to prove that you're someone special, that you could fix them, you could repair them, you could help them, you could show them that you're lovable and you're worthy. It's a deep-seated belief that if you love them hard enough, strong enough, somehow, some way, they'll finally stay. But let's be honest, that's not love, that's survival. That's trying to earn something that should be given independently, with a sense of independence and understanding that freedom. And here's where the shift begins. When the avoidant returns and you haven't seen them take any ownership of their patterns, they haven't formed the courage to say, you know what, I think we really need to just work on our friendship together. And there's nothing wrong with being friends to develop through the patterns, but both people must move through their patterns. The anxiously attached has to move through theirs, and the avoidant has to move through theirs. If they both move through them, and this takes two willing people, if they take ownership of their patterns, they're able to move forward. But if there's no real reflection, if they don't see it, and they're not consciously aware to actually see how they're being either side, no therapy, no growth, none of that, then it's not love they're after. They're simply using your emotional availability to regulate themselves. They're outsourcing their grounding to you. Why do they pick you? Why? Because you've made space for them. You've given access to your heart without actually requiring any accountability. But when you ask for growth, for emotional partnership, the avoidant dynamic gets disrupted. Because you know what? Real love, the kind that's grounded in mutual safety and respect, requires communication and vulnerability. And if you're feeling like a dentist, which, by the way, that is very true, you'll know that you are dealing with an avoidant when you feel like a dentist. What does that mean? It goes with the old saying of, I feel like I'm pulling teeth. That you're trying to communicate and you're making the smallest possible effort and it feels like you're pulling teeth. It feels like dentistry. It's so hard. It's so difficult. Like if you actually get a response in a text message, you're surprised. And you know what? In their text messages, there's also something called impression management. They're very careful about how they take command over their impression, how their impression of them is managed towards you. What that means to you is they're adjusting and tweaking their messages to form perceptions in a specific way that you read it in a specific way. That is what we call managed impressions. And if they're not ready for vulnerability, they'll retreat again. And this is not about blame. It's about awareness. It's about dual responsibility. Both people need it. And it can be about power on one side because it makes them feel good. But when you stop chasing, when you stop abandoning yourself to fix or hold on to someone else, the cycle breaks. You shift the entire equation. The moment you stop dancing to their very rhythm of their avoidance is the moment you start coming home to yourself. You start to realize that I am worth it. I am indeed worth it. You stop reacting to their inconsistency and start responding to your own truth. And you know what that does? That changes everything. And if they want to meet you in a secure connection, in a secure way, they will rise to meet you. And if not, they will exit. Either way, you win. Because you've chosen self-respect over repetition. Now, what happens with the anxiously attached is they want to prove themselves so bad. They want to show the other person that, hey, I'm special. I'm I'm someone. But here's the thing. No one externally can provide you with self-esteem. No one externally can provide you with a level of confidence. Nobody. You have to be able to stand alone in your own independence, whether you're anxious or not. And if you got to work on yourself for 6 months, please do so. Because self-esteem is not external. It is not extrinsic. It cannot be found outside of you. It is physically impossible. It must come from within. And in order to come within you, you're going to have to do some serious internal work. You may lose your entire identity in someone else in favor of trying to prove something. But you know what? It should be about growth over survival. But to make that shift, you need to grieve and let go of the fantasy. Let go of any projections, external projection, the expectation and preferences that are not matching the reality. Because the version of them that you were hoping would show up may not actually be there. And that version only exists in potential, in your projections, not in reality. You've got to let that go. You've got to honor yourself. You've got to honor it and choose what's real. Start choosing what's real. Ask yourself, what am I feeling? What do I need? What do I want? Not from them, but from life. Because quite honestly, relationships are all about matching values. If you have a set of values and it matches the other person, that's very important. But quite honestly, the communication is part of those values. If they're not a good communicator and they're being avoidant all the time and they're not communicating, they're not being vulnerable with you, then you need to develop that concept for future relationships that you need the value of vulnerability if you're going to be with anyone, period. This is your doorway. This is your victory, because the dance doesn't continue unless both dancers keep moving. And sometimes you got to choose to stand still in your truth. And that is the boldest move of them all. Now you have to be able to see how you can shape your future based on what you value in a relationship. And what you value in a relationship is not whether or not you like the same movies or these surface nonsense. It's literally internal things about each other. That you value vulnerability. You value communication. You value someone not taking you for granted. Someone that actually cares about your presence. Take a good hard look at your values and the values of a relationship and the communication towards it and how you value yourself. And that's another thing. If you don't value yourself, you may have to develop your own values. Your own values will lead you to the path of self-worth and self-confidence. And that is why we come to this show. Granted, I could be a little blunt. It's not an excuse to not have grace, because I could speak with grace. But I want to share with you that I'm confident on this topic. Work on yourself. Don't be afraid to be alone. Stand in your power. There is a difference between loneliness and alone. Loneliness can be the egotistical cling. It's when the ego is screaming for another human being out of fear, out of being alone. But when you learn to become alone, the difference between loneliness and alone, when you're alone, you work on your self-development. You exercise. You take care of yourself. You work on your mind. Because your mind, your brain is the GPS of your entire life. And you know what? You work on your values. When you work on your values, you value exercise, you value honesty, you value communication, you work on all your personal values. You know what happens? You find a relationship where the person can meet you exactly where you are. And they're going to admire the values inside of you. And that's all I've got to say for today. Take care. See you on the next episode.